Okay, next, this chapter is biomolecules. Biomolecules are the molecules which are present inside the living organisms. And in this chapter, we are going to cover, or we are going to study about the nutrients which are present inside the food. And these nutrients are the functions which are played by these nutrients into our body, their sources, their importance, and their composition, that what these nutrients are made up of. And we are also going to study that why living organisms need food, and some of the chemical elements which are present into our food that provides energy, like carbohydrates, it provides us energy. Proteins, it also provides us energy, and it also has some other functions like synthesis of the protoplasm. And fats, they also provide us energy, and they are also the component of the cell membrane, or some other functions we are going to study in detail. Then we will also design some of the tests which will identify the presence of these different components into our food. Right, so the first one we are going to start is, the first question is, girls, what do you think why we need food?
For respiration.
For respiration, yes. What we get from respiration?
Energy and ATP.
Energy, which is in the form of ATP. And what purpose?
ATP is needed for working of the body, active transport.
Yes, ATP is needed for active transport. It is used for our movement, for growth, for development, for cell reproduction. This is needed. So first is that food gives us energy, and that energy is used for different activities like active transport, for movement, for growth, for development, and for repair of some worn out cells, means the cell division. Then this food also provides us with some of the materials or nutrients which are important for maintaining the good health, which might be the part of the enzymes, enzymatic reactions. Like some of the reactions are carried out by enzymes, but along with those enzymes, some other materials are also needed. And these materials might be important for the development or growth of the bones, like calcium and phosphorus, or they might be the part of the hemoglobin like iron. So all these nutrients, all these materials are also present inside the food. So food is very important for providing us energy, and it's also important for the growth and development of our body. So this is the reason that we need food. Then there are nutrients present inside the food. Nutrients are actually the chemical substances that nourish our body. Nourish means that, again, they provide us energy and the materials, and energy and materials are required for different purposes in our body. Next, there are two types of nutrients which might be present in our food. One are the organic nutrients and other are inorganic nutrients. And both these nutrients are important for our body. They both should be provided to our body. Like organic, I think I've discussed this in the class. Organic nutrients are those which have carbon and hydrogen bond present in it, in which carbon and hydrogen bonds are present together. And I also gave you the example, C6H12O6, which is glucose. It has carbon and hydrogen present, so it is the organic molecule. And other inorganic, like carbon dioxide, it has carbon into it but not hydrogen with it, so it's the inorganic. In the same way, water, it has hydrogen but not carbon with it, so it is also the inorganic nutrients. The organic nutrients which are present in food and which should be provided to our body, these are carbohydrates. So in this topic, in this chapter, we will be discussing the carbohydrates in detail, and fats, proteins, vitamins, and dietary fibers. All these are the organic nutrients. We will be discussing one by one in detail. Inorganic nutrients are water. Water is also important to our body, and some of the mineral salts like calcium, phosphorus, potassium, iron. So these are the part of the mineral salts which should also be provided to our body. The first component we are going to discuss is the water, right? And it's important part of the protoplasm. How much water is present in the protoplasm? We have studied in cell.
70 to 90%.
Yes, 70 to 90% water is present into the protoplasm of the cell. So it means that water is very important component of the cell. And 70% by body weight, water is also present into our overall body is made up of 70% water. 90% it's present in the protoplasm and 70% it is present into the body. So that's why it's very important. Why it is important or which parts it's playing in the body? It is that it is acting as a solvent, and we call water as a universal solvent because it dissolves almost everything into it. You have to remember one thing, that organic molecules always dissolve organic solutes or organic substances, and inorganic solvents always dissolve inorganic substances. One of the example is when we dissolve salt into water, does it dissolve or not? When we dissolve, yes, it dissolves. Okay,
Yes,
and when
miss, it does dissolve.
yes, it does dissolve. And when we dissolve glucose into the water, does it dissolve? Glucose. Yes, it also dissolves. And when we mix water and oil, do they dissolve together?
No, miss.
No, they do not.
No.
And then oil come on the surface.
Yes, oil comes on the surface because of the lower density, and water settles down because of the higher density than the oil. And here in this slide, I've told you that water is actually inorganic and fats, these are the, oil is actually the type of the fat, and water is inorganic and oil is organic. So organic will not dissolve into inorganic. Water and fats will not dissolve together because fats are organic and water is inorganic, so both will not dissolve. If we are going to dissolve inorganic into inorganic, they will dissolve. And if we're going to dissolve organic into organic, it will dissolve. Another example of organic is a nail polish, which we apply on our nails, that is organic in nature. And is it removed by the water, nail polish?
Never.
No, it's never removed. Q-tips, paints, they're never removed by the water because they are organic in nature. They are removed by different organic solvents like ethanol or thinner. That can be acetone, ethanol, alcohol, or any other form of the alcohol, because they are the organic. So they dissolve organic substances, and water is inorganic, so it dissolves the inorganic substances. Right? So this
Just
is
like if the solute in solvents are organic, then they will dissolve. And if the
yes.
solute and solvent are inorganic, they will not dissolve.
No. Solute and solvent, if they both are organic, they will dissolve into one another. If the solute and solvent both are inorganic, still they will dissolve into one another. If the solute and solvent, one of them is organic and other is inorganic, then they will not dissolve, or their solubility will be very less.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the universal solvent, so it dissolves almost everything into it, or most of the substances are dissolved into it. That's why it's called the universal solvent. Second is, it is a medium for chemical reactions. The chemical reactions which are occurring into our body, they take place in the aqueous medium. Aqueous means the liquid or watery medium, so that watery medium is provided by the water. It's also important. Then it's also the transporting agent. It transports substances. Which substances? Digested food, glucose, amino acids from small intestine to different parts of the body. That is digested by the that is transported by blood, and blood has water into it. That is actually providing the transporting medium. Then excretory substances like urea, uric acid, creatinine, they are also transported by the water. Hormones are the chemical messengers. These are chemical substances which transmit messages from one part of the body to the other. Right? This is the chemical messengers like insulin. You might be familiar with the insulin, that's the hormone, but we will study this in detail in hormones. Right? So hormones, for right now, just keep this in mind that hormones are the chemical messengers. So these chemical messengers are also transported from the site where they are released to the site where they have to act upon through water. It is also providing the transporting medium. All these substances which we have studied here, they are actually transported through blood. Right? Because afterwards we will study that these are being transported through the blood. So don't get confused. Blood has actually water into it. So water or this liquid medium that is actually helping in transporting these substances from one part of the body to the other part.
Miss, can you repeat what you were saying about the
I said that water is also acting as a transporting agent. Transporting agent means that they are transporting substances from one part of the body to the other part. Which substances are transported by the water? Digested food is transported, excretory substances are transported, and hormones are transported. Right? And if we look into the detail, that all these substances are transported actually through the blood. Right? And inside blood there is water present. Don't get confused if you read somewhere that these are transported through the blood, and if you are going to read somewhere that these are transported through water, because blood has water, and that water is actually the transporting agent for all these substances. Okay. Next is it's also the major component of the blood. Component means that it's a part of the blood. It is present in blood. Blood contains 55% plasma, liquid part, and into plasma there is 90% water present. Then it's also the lubricant in the joints. Like a joints have to move, just like the locks on the door, and these locks are lubricated with the oil. We do apply oil into these locks, so they are lubricated and easily they can move. So in the same way, our joints can also easily move by some lubricants there. So that lubricant is also provided, lubrication is provided by the water that helps in their movement. Otherwise, if the lock are not, if the oil is not applied, the grease is not applied to the locks, they become stuck or there is more friction. Right? So oil actually reduces the friction, which helps in their motility or movement. So in the same way that our joints are also lubricated by water, that reduces their friction and helps in their movement. Next, water is also the part of the digestive juices like gastric juice, intestinal juice, which has enzymes into it. So they are also present in the water, liquid or solution format. Then water is also needed for the hydrolytic reactions. Hydrolytic reactions are those reactions which take place in the presence of water. I can give you one example here, like starch that is broken down in the presence of water by an enzyme which is the amylase into maltose. Right? So this is actually taking place in the presence of water, and this is the digestion. So those processes which occur in the presence of water, those are known as the hydrolytic reactions. Hydrolytic means that the water, breakdown of water, that actually brings the breakdown or helps in the breakdown of starch into maltose. Next, it's also the reactant in some of the photosynthetic reactions. In photosynthesis, we have seen, right? In photosynthesis, there reacts water with carbon dioxide. So here you can see that water is the reactant in photosynthetic reaction that forms C6H12O6 and oxygen, glucose and oxygen. So here you can see that it's also the reactant in the photosynthetic reactions. Then it also regulates blood temperature through sweat. In sweating, water is also eliminated from the body. That water accumulates in our body in the form of drops, and when those drops are evaporated, they leave behind the low energy molecules which lower the temperature of our body. So it also has a cooling effect. Then our daily requirement of the water is 3 liters, but it also depends on the environment we are living in. If we are living in dry environment or deserts, like a dry environment like Singapore, where the temperature is very high, so our daily requirement of the water will be high. It will be more than 3 liters, 5 or even above. This is the average water requirement in heat regions, like for region Pakistan, where we are living, like Lahore. So here the requirement will be 3 liters, but in dry areas it can be more, and it can also be less. Like polar or colder areas, it can be lesser than 3 liters. So this requirement varies. Average is the 3 liter requirement, and excess extra water in your body is removed through urine, sweat, breathing. Breathing, it's removed during exhalation. When we are exhaling air out, then only water is lost. When we are inhaling, water is not lost. Then some of the water is also lost through the feces. So these are the ways through which extra water is removed from the body, and we take extra water in only by drinking. This was about the water, which is the inorganic component, and second are the mineral salts, and we will discuss some of the mineral salts later, which are in the syllabus. Okay, now we are going to discuss the carbohydrates. From organic component, we are going to discuss carbohydrates for today, and proteins and fats we will discuss afterwards in the next class. Okay, carbohydrates, these are also known as the sugars. Simple. Like we use the word sugars for all the carbohydrates, and these are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. These elements actually combine, and these elements first form any of the monosaccharide, or you can say glucose. Let's take the example glucose. Then these glucose molecules, more glucose molecules combine, and they form some other carbohydrate like cellulose, glycogen, or starch, right? So if they ask you about the elements, which elements are present in carbohydrates, you are going to write about carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, because these are the elements. Glucose is not the element, because sometimes students write down that carbohydrates are mostly made up of glucose, so they write down glucose. No, glucose is the monomer or the smallest unit which is making carbohydrate, but inside glucose, or glucose is also made up of the elements which are the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Glucose is not the element, remember this. So whenever they are going to ask you about the elements, you would be writing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are making the elements of the carbohydrates. Understood? Okay, beta. Next is sources from where we can obtain the carbohydrates. Sugars like glucose, maltose, lactose, milk. Lactose is present in milk, so there we can obtain lactose, and from starch, which is present in wheat, rice, your potato, and sugars are also present in fruits. Some of the fruits have sugar cane. Sugar cane has cane sugar into it, so, and some other like maltose is present in malted foods, and cellulose is also the type of the carbohydrate that is present in plants, and chitin, it's present in the cell wall of the fungi and exoskeleton of the arthropods. I think we have studied this in arthropods. Arthropods are the jointed legs, arthropoda. We studied in insecta. We studied one of the class of the arthropoda. They have an extra skeleton outside, which is present outside the body. The skeletal is present outside the body. It's not similar to our skeletal, which is present inside the body. So that's why it's known as the exoskeletal, because it is present outside the body. That skeletal is made up of a carbohydrate, which is the chitin. Okay, these are the sources, and some other sources can also be there like fruits, or you can also mention or specify the fruits in which carbohydrates are present. Next is the function of the carbohydrates. They are the source of energy, like glucose, which is the instant source of energy. When our body's energy gets down, we take glucose or we eat some of the fruits like banana, which have glucose into it, which are the instant source of energy. Then they have the supporting function like cellulose, which is present in the cell wall of the plant. It is supporting the cell, providing support and strength to the plant cell. Then it's also the component of the nucleic acid. We also have discussed this in chapter cell. Nucleic acid, DNA, which is the deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, which is the ribonucleic acid. These are the components. They contain ribose sugar. RNA contains ribose, and we use the word sugar with it. It means that the ribose is carbohydrate, and DNA contains deoxyribose sugar, so that is also the sugar. So here we have seen that it's also the component of the nucleic acid. And then other functions are they also synthesize some of the lubricants. And one of the example of the lubricant I gave you is present between our joints. But there are some other lubricants which are known as the mucus, and these mucus are made up of carbohydrates and proteins. So when we will be discussing the functions of the protein, we will also say that proteins are used to synthesize mucus. And this mucus is present in different parts of our body, like they are the part of the digestive system. They're present inside the digestive system, or this mucus is also present in our respiratory system, like trachea or windpipe. This trachea or windpipe has mucus inside. Look inside this yellow one. If I draw here, the yellow inside is the mucus. This mucus actually prevents the trapping of the bacteria into the trachea. If any of the bacteria enters into your enters into your trachea or your respiratory system, that is trapped by this mucus, and then they are sent into the esophagus, from where they are removed from our body through feces. Digestive system, they are removed. Bacteria are trapped by or paralyzed by this mucus. Then they will be sent into the esophagus, from where they are removed from the body. And in
excuse me, miss.
Yes.
Miss, in previous class we have learned that the mucus helps to it covers esophagus and it prevents from damage. Like food है, मिस कुछ hard food होते हैं जो आपके esophagus को harm कर सकते हैं. तो इसलिए mucus होता है.
Yes, I'm going to. Better, it's not present in one part of our body. It is present in many parts of our body. So I am just discussing the function of mucus in few parts. Right? I've just discussed in the trachea. Trachea में भी होता है, stomach में भी होता है, small intestine में भी होता है. Trachea में its function is if any of the bacteria gets entry into our body. ठीक है, तो bacteria जो है, that is paralyzed by the mucus. The mucus which is present inside this, it will paralyze those bacteria, and they will send them into the esophagus, from where they are removed from the body. So mucus in trachea has different function. But in small intestine, I have drawn here the small intestine, and inside this yellow one is showing the mucus. The mucus inside the small intestine is covering the walls of the small intestine, right? And here it has different function. Here it is preventing the walls of the stomach from being eaten up by HCl, hydrochloric acid, which is present inside the stomach, and it also prevents the wall of this stomach from being eaten up by the protease, because protease enzyme is present in stomach, and that protease will digest the proteins, and the walls of the stomach are also made up of proteins. So to prevent their walls from being digested by the protease and by hydrochloric acid, so another layer of mucus is present. around these walls. So here is it has different function, and in trachea it has different function, right? And some other parts of the body it will have different functions. So we are not going to discuss all functions. I've just given you the two examples, and I think these are enough for you to understand mucus. Next, nectar, which is produced by the flowering plant, that is also sweet in nature, and that nectar contains carbohydrates. So it also produces nectar, and this nectar helps in pollination. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma, from male part of the flower to the female part. And actually insects come to the flowers to collect this nectar, which is sugary or sweet in taste. And when they come to collect this nectar, some of the pollen grains stuck to their body. And when they fly onto the other flower, then those pollen grains which were stuck, they actually fall onto the other flower where they can fertilize with the female part, and they can germinate. So transfer of pollen from one part of the flower to the other part is known as pollination. So they help in pollination. Next is converting into amino acids. These carbohydrates are also converted into amino acids, which can form the proteins, and they're also converted into fats. All right, so these are some of the functions of the carbohydrates. Just give me a second, guys. Let me take your attendance.
Miss, can you share the slides in group 2?
What should I send in group 2?
Miss, these slides.
Okay, but I will send you the PDF. Do you receive the PDF which I share?
Miss, I received the last PDF which you sent, but
Okay,
not this one.
Okay, this is not the complete. Definitely, beta, I will be sending after lecture, not before lecture. So this will not be this is not the complete biomolecule chapter. Some of the topics are missing. So make the notes. What we are going to study today, later we will study afterwards. The remaining topics I will send afterwards. Now carbohydrates, there are 3 types of the carbohydrates, sugar. We are just going to wind it up in 10 minutes. Carbohydrates, there are 3 types of carbohydrates: monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Mono are those which are made up of only one sugar, and these are also known as the simple sugars because they are made up of only one, and these are also known as the monomers. Monomer. Okay, mono means just one unit, and monomer can be used for one amino acid, and monomer can be, yes, it can also be used for one amino acid, and it can also be used for one sugar. So just for one unit we use the word mono. Mer is general term, but if we're going to use the saccharide is used for the carbohydrates or for the sugars. Here you can see saccharide. So saccharides are the carbohydrates. Monomer is general. You can use this for proteins, you can use this for carbohydrates, but if you have to specify the carbohydrates, then we will use the monosaccharides. These are also known as the simple sugars, and examples of the monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose. Next are the disaccharides. These are made up of 2 monomers. Like this is the one sugar or one monomer. When these 2, 1 and 1 join together, they are known as the dimers or disaccharides. When more than 2 combine together, then they are known as the polysaccharides. There is a bond between them. So polysaccharides are also known as the complex sugars because it contains more monomers. Example of disaccharides are maltose, lactose, and sucrose, and examples of polysaccharides are starch, cellulose, and glycogen. Now we are going to see these examples. Here you can see the monomer. This one unit is showing the monomer. 2 are showing the disaccharides, and here you can see that more monosaccharides are joined together, which is forming the polysaccharide. Right, monosaccharide, they have the general formula C6H12 and O6. Right, this is the general formula of the monosaccharides, and here we have seen that there are 3 monosaccharides: glucose, fructose, and galactose. So all these 3 will have the same general formula, which is C6, H12, and O6. So all these 3 have the same formula. Next examples are glucose. We have already discussed, but we are going to see their sources. Glucose is obtained from the grape sugar, so it's present in almost all the fruits. Next, it's also found in animals and plants, fruits. Fructose, it is widespread or present in plants. It's not present in animals. Galactose, it is present in milk. The milk we eat, it has lactose sugar, and lactose sugar is made up of galactose and glucose. Here, yes, these are the structures and formulas of glucose. Glucose has, you can see, C6H12 and O6. Fructose also has C6H12 O6. Galactose also has C6H12 and O6. If they all have the same molecular formula, then where is the difference lying? Difference is in their structural formula. Here you can see it has 6 corners, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 5 corners, right? And it has 6 corners, but its 1 carbon is here, right? So all these have the same molecular formula, but they all have different structural formula. This is the glucose. Next are the disaccharides. Disaccharides have C12H22O11. Now girls, if 2 glucose are going to join together, one glucose and another glucose, formula of glucose is C6H12 and O6, right? And if 2 glucose molecules are going to join together, C6H12O6, what we are going to get? If you're going to combine these together, what we are going to get? C12H24O12.
Miss, the class is over, I think so.
Miss, our next class is started just 5 minutes ago.
Okay, no problem, beta. We will continue from disaccharides in the next class. You may join your next class. Okay. I'm going to sign out. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.